If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Tonight's guest is Joey. Joey, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic, for having me. Thank you for making the time to talk to me.
Well, thanks for being here. We appreciate your time. Joey, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I've basically have only done 2 jobs in my whole life. I've been in the military and I've done electrical work, and fortunately that's paid out on both ends for myself. So that's basically my life. Ex-military and simply do electrical work. Married with a 16-year-old that I no longer know because she's at that point, but I love her dearly. And I never thought that I'd get into all this cryptid stuff. I had curiosity about it. I've always been curious about things, but it's very surprising once you realize these things actually do exist and it's not just stories that you're listening to. So that's the short and the long of it as far as my life. And now I'm just simply trying to move on after the experiences that I've had in my life and what I've recently seen that I'm still processing, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's going to take some time. You're going to be processing it for a while. And it's funny how it works with this cryptid stuff. You just look around and you realize you're neck deep in it. Never expected that to happen. It just happens sometimes. It's just how it works. And thank you so much for your service to our country. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vic. That means a lot coming from you.
Oh, I mean it. You're a good man. Joey, you live in a place where there's a history of cryptid encounters. What more can you tell us about that?
I've been fascinated for a while with the cryptid stuff due to some other previous experiences. So I kind of did a little bit of research into Middletown, Maryland. That's in Frederick County. And I actually found quite a few reports previously of Dogman sightings in the area. And this was mostly in the 70s and early 80s. You know, unfortunately, it's developed a lot more than what I like it to be because there's a lot more people moving in now. But I was actually surprised by that. And part of it, I think, has to do with the original settlers that moved into that area of Maryland. And again, it was just a fascination that I had. It wasn't necessarily that I guess I have to admit, I didn't necessarily believe it because I still thought it was a campfire story. So I looked into it and I was fascinated, and I've heard so many people talk about it, and I'm like, what would it be like to run into a werewolf? I know it's not a werewolf like a person changing into a wolf type creature, but it always fascinated me because, Native Americans talk about all these entities. So I just always, within myself, I figured there has to be something to it. And the fact that I lived in an area where these things are around, that was fascinating to me. It definitely intrigued me, and hence how I found your podcast. And I kept listening to it. It's like what I always tell people is like, okay, 999 people could be lying about a subject. But if that one person that gets to 1,000 is telling the truth, that changes the paradigm. All you need is for one person to tell the truth about what they actually saw. And obviously, I'm not saying that everybody else is a liar. I'm simply saying it just takes one person. And once you get to that point of view, it's really very hard to deny the fact that these things actually exist. So I was surprised by Because when we moved in there, that's not what I was looking for. I was just looking for a stable home for my kid to grow up in a nice neighborhood with normal people. And then I find out this is the background of it. So certainly took me by surprise. I enjoyed it because I thought it was just stories, but that is the background of the area I live in.
Sure would be awfully nice if it was just stories, but as you know, that's not the case. From what you've learned, have only Dogman sightings been reported there in the Middletown area, or have you heard about other cryptid sightings being reported there?
No, we are not too far away from the Potomac River, and I've actually heard several sightings of Sasquatch in some of the more prominent rivers around there, from people camping and kayaking and stuff like that. So, and those are not from the 70s and 80s, but actually quite recent. So apparently there's a lot of stuff, I guess maybe just moving through the area, because, you know, it is getting a lot more populated, but we are in a valley that's nestled in between the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains and the Catoctin Mountains. Now, when I say mountains, obviously the people in the Northwest are going to laugh at me because to them we're just hills. But for our area, they're the little mountains we have. But, you know, we have a large population of wildlife, from bears and coyotes and deer, you know, any animal you could think of, bobcats, you know, we do have all those animals in the area. It's not a rare thing necessarily to find bears going through our neighborhood. Most of our neighbors now have the Ring cameras, so they'll send out text messages saying, hey, look, there's a bear here. You know, my daughter's got to walk to the bus stop because she leaves obviously last. I leave first, her mom, and then she's got to get herself to the bus. But those alerts go out, you know, at least several times during the year before they go to hibernate. So we don't live in the most rural area, but we definitely live in an area where there's still a lot of wildlife that comes through.
Do you see the idea that so many cryptids are in your area as a good thing or a bad one, considering how interested you are in cryptids?
I would have to say that I don't necessarily enjoy the idea because of the fact that of how I see them. And it's one thing to run into a bear, because most black bears, once they see you, they're going to turn and run. I've given my daughter some mace that she can carry with her to the bus stop, you know, before school, because sometimes, especially in winter, it starts to get dark earlier or light later. And so I do worry about those things, but it's not something that is not unnatural, you know, that unless you run into a mom with cubs, then you're going to be in trouble. But other than that, most other animals, even a coyote that gets too friendly, which they don't around my area because they get taken care of, but I'm not afraid of nature. I've never been that person, and I give my wife and my daughter the warnings when they need it. But, you know, a cryptid that's not a normal thing that we're supposed to run into. You know, those are supposed to be fairy tales. Those are the monsters we were always told don't exist. So to come to grips with the fact that they do exist, I don't know how to break that especially to my daughter. I don't know. How do I tell her, hey, honey, look, you might run into a werewolf at some point in your life. How do you tell that to your child? How do you bring that up? That's one of those things that personally I'm not comfortable with. I don't know how to handle that part of it still. It took me enough time to, and like I said, I'm still processing it myself. So how do I go to my kid now and tell her the monsters under your bed are real, that they really are out there? Because I don't want to set her up for failure and tell her, no, honey, that's just your imagination, or those are things that don't exist. No, I want to tell her like the same thing that I tell her. You might run into a bear going to the school bus. Take the mace with you. That's me just as a dad hoping, okay, you never have to use it. You might run into a coyote. This is how you handle that. I'm just trying to prepare my kid, to be successful. How do I tell her, okay, you might run into a dogman? That I just don't see how you can prepare anybody for that kind of stuff. And even me, myself, that's been involved in the topic because of my fascination and some of my experiences. If it still takes me as an adult time to process it, how would my kid process that? So I would say that no, I'm not comfortable knowing that these things are around in such a, it is a rural area, but it's not so rural that we're in the middle of nowhere. We're 20 minutes up from a decent sized little city. Frederick City's just, a little city, not major or anything like that, but it's still a city. But, outside of our development, on either side, we're basically surrounded by woods and farms. And I wouldn't think that these things would find that an ideal environment to be around in. So it's definitely not something that I'm always comfortable with. I leave really early in the mornings for work. I always think about, okay, am I going to be the guy that walks out and steps in between a mother bear and her cubs and gets mauled? Because that actually happened where I lived before. Somebody walked out into a driveway and got mauled because they walked out in between a mother bear and her cubs. DNR got involved and everything else, but that's just the reality of the area I live in. And I'm okay with that. So I let my dogs out in the morning, make sure that they clear everything out. After that, then, that's when I walk out. But I'm pretty sure that if there's a 10-foot Sasquatch or a 10-foot Dogman outside, I'm pretty sure my dogs aren't going out to chase that off. And hopefully I can pick up on the vibe and understand. But that's one of those things that you never think you're going to have to worry about. And once it does happen, then no, I don't feel comfortable. They should be up in Washington County in British Columbia in the middle of nowhere, not in Maryland.
They should be and only be found there, but as you know, that's not how it is. And yeah, to 99.999% of the population, the knowledge that you do have cryptids hanging around, that's not going to give you the warm and fuzzies. So I get it. I really do. If you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. All right, Joey, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay, well, I live in Frederick, Maryland, but I come up to Hartford County also a lot because my sister is basically my mother's caretaker. my mom's old and she's got dementia, so my sister's retired from the military, so thankfully she has the ability to take care of my mother, and that's a very overwhelming task at times. So I come up here a lot, several times a week, to just give her a break. I come up here after work, and then she can go out with her friends, do whatever she needs to do. And so that's the area where this happened. It's Hartford County. It's right around the Gunpowder State Park, which has a lot of tributaries in it. They lead all down to the Chesapeake Bay. And again, like I said, I leave early for work, so this area also has a history of these creatures being here. And sometimes when you're leaving in the morning in the middle, I usually leave by 3:20, 3:15, 3:20. You do think about it when you walk outside, but it is what it is. I got to go to work. And I always thought, well, if I'm going to see one of these things, it's going to be at this time. When I'm leaving, when I'm going to work, and I'm driving through these narrow little roads that are surrounded by woods and creeks running by and everything else, this is where I'm going to run into this thing if I see it. But my experience actually didn't happen like that. My job sometimes requires me to change schedules, and on this particular time, I was actually doing a late evening shift into the early morning. And what happened was I was leaving around 3 p.m. in the afternoon to be able to get down there by 5, where the job site was. And I was pulling out of her development, getting onto the road. So I come to the stop sign, and I'm going to go right to continue to go on about my way. But when I looked both ways, because obviously I have to look both ways, on my left-hand side, I saw movement that caught my eye. And at first I thought it was a bear. It was black shiny fur is what I thought it was. So I immediately think bear, because I've seen black bears before where I live. So I'm thinking, okay, that's a bear. Before I get into those details, I just want to add a little bit more background to it, if I may. The place where I saw this animal crossing is kind of like a narrow strip of woods that runs in between the houses and developments. And honestly, I don't know the area well enough to know how far it goes or where it's coming from. But there's a lot of deer trails that go through there. And as a matter of fact, my sister and I were coming back one day together from the store, and we almost hit a deer that ran out in front of us, and there was like a whole herd of deer coming across. So it's a very well-traveled corridor in between the homes that are here. So I just want to establish that it's a known wildlife corridor. So I look left and I see this thing going across, like I said, and I'm thinking it's a bear. But it was not a bear. Once I actually looked at it and stared at it, I realized very quickly it was not a bear. It was a canine. It was a dog. And there's nothing surprising about seeing a dog crossing a road. You might feel sorry for it if it's a stray, but inherently there's nothing strange about seeing a dog going across a road. But it definitely caught my attention. And I focused on it, I looked at it, and it grabbed my curiosity enough that I actually turned left instead, and I went up there to see if I could see it again. I couldn't. It had crossed the road and it was gone. I continued on to work, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. And it kept bugging me and bugging me. Then I was asking myself, why is this bothering you so much? And this is where I'm going to tell your listeners a little bit more about myself. Maybe I should have said this earlier. I have been in the military. I have been trained in observation because of the skill set that was required for my job. So I can at times notice a lot of things that other people won't notice very quickly, you could say. And it just gets imprinted and then I can process it. And that's exactly what I started to do. I have a background also with working with rescues. The predominant breed I work with is German Shepherds. I've been around Rottweilers. I've been around Great Danes, Great Pyrenees. I've seen a lot of large, powerful dogs. A couple of King Corsos. So I have a lot of experience also. Because I started working with rescues when I was in my 20s. I'm now almost 50. I'm 49. So I have a lot of experience also with dogs. I currently have dogs. The young male I have is a 100-pound German Shepherd. Because of this incident, I actually went home and measured him. He's 24 inches at the shoulder. Without the head, from the shoulders to the back, without the tail, he's 30 inches. The head's about, with the snout's about almost 14 inches because he's German blood working line. So they breed for a bigger head because they're made for police work. And estimating the distance was right around 300 meters to where I saw this dog. Maybe less. I mean, I could be off on that. I haven't measured that. But I did measure the road. I went out there with the tape measure and I measured the road. It's 20 feet across. It's only a 2-lane road, 20 feet across. And all this is going to come into play once I get it all out. Like I said, it happened recently, so I'm still trying to process everything. Now, so I measured the dog, I measured the road, and I continued to process this information. The animal I saw crossing the road at that distance, because I've seen my dog when he's 100 yards away from me or more, he looks tiny. He looks tiny at that distance. And maybe I should go back and measure, because 300 meters sounds maybe longer than what it is. Maybe it was 200 meters. Like I said, I'm still in the middle of processing all this. But the point being is that whether it was 100, 200, 300 meters, I know what my dog looks like at that distance. And at that distance, my dog would look tiny. And he's a big 100-pound German Shepherd. When he puts his head up, the dog is pretty big. That dog dwarfed him. That dog absolutely dwarfed my dog. And I think that's why my subconscious could not get over it. It kept going back and back through my head, because to me, when I first looked at it, okay, it's not a bear, it's a dog. But then I kept thinking about it, and it's like, there's no dog that should be that big at that distance that I saw it at. And at one point, I was listening to an eyewitness you previously had before with a Dogman encounter in Maryland, just maybe 20 miles south of here. And what got me about it, she actually saw it standing up on two legs. It was completely white, and they actually locked eyes and looked at each other. But the one detail she described so well was the tail. She said it had a bushy tail, and she described it, and I thought about it. It's like, that's exactly what I saw. It was the same tail, where the tail was bushy, but not like a bushy dog, or even my German Shepherd has longer hairs towards the end of the tail. But the way she described it from the bottom, like close to the body, you could see it had longer hair. But as it went further down the tail, it got longer and longer and longer till it became bushy. And that's what I saw crossing the road. And again, I didn't get to see the head. I saw it from the shoulders back. But then I realized that because of the curve of the road and the trees, I didn't get to see the head. But that animal was taking up almost half the road. And half the road should be 10 feet. I'm not saying that this animal was 10 feet long from the shoulder to its rear. I'm not saying that. I'm saying almost. But even if it's almost, I can compare it to my dog that I literally measured 30 inches from the shoulder to its rear. Other bigger dogs, even Great Danes and stuff like that, maybe I'll give you another foot. Maybe you'll be 40, 50 inches, right? That's still under 5 feet. And for half of the road, which is 10 feet, how does an animal get that close? Because now you're pushing anywhere from 6, 7, 8 feet. I've never seen a dog that large. And at that distance, if that dog was probably 2 to 3 times the height of my dog, even Irish hounds, wolfhounds don't get that big. I've never seen or heard of a dog that's 6 feet at the shoulder. Maybe somebody can correct me, but I've never heard of an animal of a dog that tall and that long. And because it was afternoon, it never hit me. Okay, this might be this or this might be that. I just saw it, looked at it. I went there to look for it again. Wasn't there. Caught my interest that much that I detoured and went to look for it when I was on my way to work. But at that time, I don't think I really processed it. It took me quite a while just to think about it and say, what exactly was that? Because that's not natural. And that's basically what I saw. That was my roadside crossing. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yes, Vic, it was a Dogman. But I saw an unusually large canine crossing the road. And I've seen bears running across the highway before. all out, just bolting across the road. And I always think, oh, that's so cool. I got to see a bear today. I've seen coyotes starting in front. Awesome, I got to see a coyote. They're so cool. But I don't dwell on it. I don't think about it weeks later. I don't keep going back to that. I just think that was a really nice moment. That was a cool memory. I got to see one. That was really cool. This thing, for whatever reason, is just simply taking up too much space in my head. Maybe people may not believe me, but what I saw to me was not natural. And like I said, maybe it was just a roadside crossing. And I can't even tell you that it was. I didn't see it on running across on two legs. I didn't see that it was transparent or anything like that. I just saw a really unusually large dog running across the road.
I respect the fact that you're not telling us what it was that you saw. You're just telling us what you saw. And when I listen to the details, I can't see how it could have been anything but a dogman, because nothing else fits that description. So it's pretty cut and dry to me on that. Before I start asking you questions about your encounter there, Joey, I want to touch on something. The eyewitness that you just mentioned who saw that big white dogman across the road from her apartment, that was Mindy. Mindy was featured on episode 587, and it was titled, Please Don't Come In. Well, less than a week ago, I think less than 5 days ago, Mindy had another dogman encounter with that same big white dogman. It was behind her apartment building, and this time her boyfriend saw it. So I spoke with her, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, but they're both doing fine, but since her boyfriend was able to see it with her, I think that really did help her quite a bit. And thank goodness for that. You might hear her come back on the show to update us on that encounter. You might not. But as far as her whole dogman situation goes, it sounds to me like she's in a pretty good place. And as long as we can say that, then that's a great thing.
It is. I'm glad she's in a much better position with her boyfriend being able to see it too, because I know she had a very difficult time with her first experience.
Oh, sure, and understandably so. Yeah, you see something like that, and especially when it did what it did after she went into her apartment, it's understandable how that's going to affect her the way it did. When you've reflected on seeing that dogman, Joey, have you ever wanted to kick yourself for trying to get a better look at it instead of just driving away immediately?
Not necessarily. Because truly at that moment, I really did not understand what I was seeing. I was simply curious. And that's just part of my personality is, I just wanted to make sure what I saw. And to confirm or, debunk, I guess, for lack of a better word, what I had actually seen. Because something inside of me told me that there was something off on that. And maybe I didn't acknowledge it consciously, but I knew there was something off. And that's the reason why I detoured and went to see if I could still catch a glimpse of it.
I can understand why you decided to go and try to get a better look. I mean, you were in your vehicle after all, and that's going to make you feel safer than you actually are. But it's understandable that you felt safe enough because of that to try to, like I said, take a second look. So I get it. I know that you were definitely into Sasquatch before you had that dogman encounter, but did Dogman not move the needle for you before you actually saw that one?
being completely honest, I think that, and I know this sounds silly when you get into it, but Sasquatch is a much easier concept to wrap your mind around instead of a werewolf. Yes, I know it's not a werewolf, but just for the sake of it, instead of wrapping your mind around a werewolf, that just simply puts it a little bit more out there. And I'm not denying the fact that they've been seen for hundreds and thousands of years, even back to the Egyptians, but I think your mind just takes it like a story until you see something that really adds a little bit more truth to it in your world. And then, I mean, I look at it this way. I've listened to your podcast forever. I believe the people that have come on to your show and have told their encounters, I 100% believe them. But even with that knowledge, I'm not going to lie to you. It kind of destabilizes you a little bit to truly, truly know that something like that may be out there. There's something much more unsettling about that than a giant ape in the woods, which I don't think that's necessarily what it is, but that's another story. But I don't want to run into a werewolf that's standing on its hind legs. I don't want to run into that thing. And I do think about that sometimes when I'm walking out into the darkness to get to my car or whatever. And that's something that has been brought in front of my face now with clear reality. And the thing about it, Vic, is I didn't see it in the middle of the night. I wasn't coming home late. I wasn't doing. It was in broad daylight, in between houses. Like the freaking thing just owned the world. That's the part that I think that bothers me a little bit more sometimes, because again, I'm not going to tell you that it was, but if it was, this thing's just going on about its business, and they could care less about who sees it or what they think about it. It's just doing its own thing. And that, I think, at times makes it a little bit more discomforting than, say, a Sasquatch. At least they apparently, for the most part, either keep it to the night or try to remain unseen. This thing just seems like it thinks it owns the world, and only something that's very powerful and confident acts in that manner. And I guess that makes me a little bit more uneasy about that fact.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to buy into the fact that Sasquatch are definitely out there than Dogmen, but as hard as it might be to believe, Dogmen are definitely out there too. It's hard to explain, but that doesn't change the fact they're out there. So that's all there is to that. You've got some formidable dogs living with you. How much faith do you have in their ability to protect you from that dogman if it decides to pay you a visit sometime?
Truthfully, as you and I have spoken previously privately, I have enough military training to react to a dangerous situation. My dogs are trained in protection, as I have spoken with you previously as well. I don't think my dogs would stand a chance against an animal that large. And I don't even know if I have a caliber powerful enough. I mean, that's debatable, but I would not let my dogs go after something like that. I would immediately recall them. And from even their previous encounters with what we think was a Sasquatch, they know better than to challenge something like that. I know my dogs wouldn't stand a chance against it, but truthfully, I think that they would not even challenge something like that.
Yeah, they wouldn't stand a chance, like you said. I know you've got that big male Dogo Argentino, but yeah, even a dog like that wouldn't stand a chance. He wouldn't even be a speed bump. So hopefully that old boy's never going to pay you a visit, so that never even is a factor. In our first conversation, I asked if you were traumatized, and you told me that you weren't. But you also, in that same conversation, told me that there are several things that you used to do in the woods without a second care or thought that you can't do now. And if that's the case, why the change in your comfort level in the woods if you aren't traumatized?
Well, you definitely called me out on that, and I would have to agree with you on that. I've heard you say so many times, you don't know how many times these things have seen you, and I've even spoke to you about previous experiences where I think maybe there was something around because of how the atmosphere changed. But you know, they say ignorance is bliss. Like if you don't know that these things are out there and you just hear stories, it's a lot easier to go on about your business and live your life. Once you realize these things are truly out there and you actually have sightings. I mean, if they wanted to kill us, they would have been killing tons of people by now. And there's pretty much nothing anybody could do about it unless we start sending military teams in to kill them, which frankly, I have heard stories about that kind of stuff happening, but that's besides the point. But truthfully, I mean, just somebody hiking through the woods with their dog, no, you can't do anything about it. And despite my training, maybe it's not even so much that I think physically that they're going to attack me and do something to me. Maybe it's just my own mind trying to wrap itself around this whole concept is I don't want to run into a werewolf in the woods. I don't want to run into a 10-foot, 12-foot darn giant, hairy giant in the woods. It just, even if I know it's there, even if I know it's real, I don't want to run into it. It's the same way, well, maybe not the same way, but when people go hiking where grizzly bears are present, that's the last thing you want to run into. You don't want to run into a massive grizzly bear, especially an angry one. You don't want to. But even a grizzly bear doesn't bring the kind of fear that these things do. It's a very unnatural sensation you get around them with both Sasquatch and Dogmen. It goes back to what I've said before. I don't think that these creatures are simply flesh and blood. I think there's a lot more to it than that. I personally, in my humble opinion, I think that there's a spiritual aspect to it. And I'm not going to make your podcast a religious thing, but there's something unnatural about it. And your body just tells you that immediately. It just gives you those vibes. I mean, like I said, I've seen bears. I've run into bears before when I was hunting. I had a bear come charging out of some bushes one time when I was bow hunting with a friend of mine in Georgia, and it scares you. It scares you. I was bow hunting, but I had a handgun with me. I pulled it thinking we were getting, we were about to get mauled, but the bear just ran down the hill and minded its own business. But it scared me. It scared us. but my hair didn't go up. I didn't have anything, just, I guess we could say it startled us. But these things put a primal fear into you that's not natural. That the way they make you feel is not natural for even normal fear. It goes beyond the fight or flight mode. It goes into something where I don't even know how to explain that. They're not normal.
It's hard to explain, but I know exactly what you mean. I really do. Yeah, there's definitely something extra special about these guys. You can't just explain them away by saying that they're all flesh and blood creatures that are just out there trying to scratch out a living. Some of them might be, but yeah, there are definitely some dogmen that do things that are so far above and beyond that. They've got to be something else. You just touched on this. You're a man of strong faith. Did seeing that dogman have an effect on your relationship with God?
Absolutely not. Not in the sense that it's going to shake my faith or anything like that. I think it strengthens my faith because a lot of people take scripture for just a set of rules. They show up to church, they sit, they stand up, they sing, they listen. Then they go back to their lives and they just go on about their business, like wait until the next weekend. But when you actually read scripture, there's so many supernatural things in scripture to begin with. And it touches on so many things that were created that are not natural. So many beings that exist that are not natural. So for me, it just emphasizes that it's actually the truth, and it's talking about these things openly and expressing it openly. Most people ignore that, but as far as my faith, it just gets stronger in that sense, in my beliefs. Yes, as a human being, I do feel fear. I do get scared. But at the very end of the day, I know who's got my back. And I mean, I've been to war and I came back, and I believe that that's on my mom's prayers. And, as scripture says, every man is appointed to die at some point. So I don't necessarily fear death. It's going to happen to all of us. That's just a fact. I don't feel that it affected my faith. I think it strengthened my faith. It strengthened my beliefs in what's in scripture. And I know these things are out there. And that's why I believe that they are not natural beings, because, like I said, I'm going to start preaching on your podcast, but now it strengthened my faith because it allows me to see all the things that it talks about, that they are out there. They're real, and by no means do I want to face it. But if I have to face it, I'm not afraid in the sense that if it's going to take my life, I know where I'm going when I die. So I don't fear it in that sense. Do I want to die at its hands? Absolutely not, obviously. But as far as faith goes, if that's what it has to be, then it has to be. And I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah, that does. And you're a good man for feeling that way. You've had other paranormal experiences besides your dogman encounter. Have you ever played with a Ouija board?
Not on purpose. When I was a kid in third grade, when it would rain, they would bring out all the board games, and I remembered one of those was a Ouija board.
Oh no!
And I remember playing with it with some of the other little kids in the classroom, and I didn't know what it was. I just, when you're a little kid at that age, you just think it's a game. And I remember messing with it. I'm not going to tell you that I felt the little piece move or anything like that, because we truly were just innocent little kids thinking we were playing a game. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it was for. I just thought it was another board game that they would give us at recess when it was raining outside. So that's a realization actually that just recently came to me, is that, yeah, I had actually been around that. And who knows, maybe that's what opened the door somewhere to allow me to see all the things I've seen in my life, because I've lived a very paranormal life, you could say.
Yeah, it just might have opened the door, unfortunately. Thickening the plot further, when you were a kid, you had a profound Bigfoot sighting. You came on Bigfoot Eyewitness episode 513, actually, and you spoke with me about that encounter. I'm wondering, though, how would you compare and contrast what it was like to have that Sasquatch encounter compared to the one you had with the Dogman?
The Sasquatch, if that's truly what it was, that I saw was, I still think it was a baby because of how little it was. And being 12 years old at that time myself, I liken it to just two little kids running into each other in the woods. And it almost seemed to have as much curiosity about me, because it was just looking at me when I turned around and saw it. And that's all I was curious about it too. I didn't have any sense of dread. I didn't feel anything. I didn't think about anything. It was just a curious little animal in the woods that I hadn't seen before. Whereas this thing, all I saw was running across the road. And I couldn't let it go. When I went home after seeing that, my brother said, "Oh, it was probably just a big squirrel." And I let it go. It didn't take up any space in my thoughts. I'm like, whatever. It was still in the back of my head, but I left it there. This thing, since I saw it a couple of months ago, still keeps coming back. And now I think, when I'm going out to my car, am I going to see it again? Is it going to be there? Is it going to be standing on two legs this time? So it's been drastically different from my sighting when I was a kid to seeing this thing. This thing just left every feeling of something being wrong with me.
Well, it goes without saying, I sure hope you never do see that Dogman again. I really hope you never do. Have you made that drive again? The drive where you saw the Dogman since the encounter happened?
I have. Like I said, I mean, it's literally in my sister's development, and since I come up here several times a week, I have been through there. I've driven through it. I don't know if I don't think about it, but it's, I'm kind of hoping on the odds. What are the odds that I want to see something like that?
Good way to look at it. Whatever it takes to comfort yourself. Huh?
Exactly. But, I got to do what I got to do, whether it's there or not. I mean, I can't stop living my life. I may not go hunting as deep as I used to. I may not go fishing in the rural areas I used to anymore, but I still got to live my life, even if it makes me uncomfortable at times.
It's good you understand that. Yeah, life does go on. And I know that, you saw it in her development, but that doesn't preclude the chance you might have decided to just start going a different way. So I wasn't really sure. There are things you don't do in the woods anymore. And with that in mind, I thought, okay, if it's moved the needle that much, maybe he goes a different way, and he hasn't been that same way since that encounter.
They do bother. It does bother me. Those things do bother me. But again, I go back to, that's where I go back to my faith. It is what it is, and nothing will happen without his permission to begin with. So if it's my time, it's my time. And I can't do anything about it. And if my time comes, I'm simply going home. And that's the way I look at it.
I like the way you think. I really do. You participated in an exercise at Fort Polk where you had an interesting experience one night. Please expand on that for us.
Certainly. What we do, what all units do before they deploy, they go to, most units go to Fort Polk, where they have a designated area where you basically practice out the missions depending on what your job is. And you go through these exercises with people that basically grade you. They're watching you. They know everything you're doing. So you get these quote unquote missions that you have to do. For my particular job, we were assigned to overwatch a bridge, and there was only 4 of us being sent out on the team. We were supposed to get there before daylight. We were there to quote unquote stop the bad guys from blowing up the bridge. So we had to pick an area that we could overwatch the whole bridge and intercept and stop that if they did show up. We left at night because that's when we always operated, and we worked at night. We were moving through the woods towards our objective, but it kept getting darker and darker and darker. And mind you, we're using military optics, night vision. And, you know, we're all fully trained on how to use this stuff. It's not the first time we're using it. So we're used to walking in the woods, basically just looking through one eye at this little circle. And you have to get used to the depth perception through this, because you can't just look at it won't adjust to what's close to you, and it won't adjust to what's further away from you. So you have to set it somewhere in the middle, and you have to learn how to judge what's right next to you and what's further away from you, and you eventually get used to it. So that's what we were doing, and that's how we were moving. But eventually, for whatever reason that night, we started losing so much light due to the canopy we were under and cloud cover, I would say. And it got to the point where we literally could not see our hands in front of our faces. And this is using night vision. We couldn't see anything. One of my friends actually fell in a ditch, and he couldn't get back up because of the gear we were carrying. He couldn't get back up by himself. So we had to break protocol, and we turned on white lights to see where he was. We picked him up, and at that point, our team leader made the decision to stay put. I said, if we can't see, then quote unquote, the enemy can't see us either. So we're just going to sit here till we get a little bit of daylight. Once we have enough light to move, we're going to start moving again towards the objective. And the way we work is we pull guard. You know, people can sleep. Somebody's always pulling guard. Sometimes it's just one guy. Sometimes it's 2 guys. We simply thought it was just too dark to move, so it was just going to be one person pulling guard. We couldn't see anything, but at least you can hear something coming towards you or something like that. So I volunteered. I was going to be the first watch. And the way we operate, we basically went back to back. So there were 4 of us back to back. We got 360 degrees security all around. And I tell you, Vic, that night was the most silent night I've ever heard in the woods. I mean, it was so quiet that it could almost make my ears ring. It was that quiet. And that's really weird. Because especially in Louisiana, you have tons of things. From bugs and little critters, frogs. The woods don't go that quiet. And it was pitch black and absolutely silent. And I just felt like something was watching me. And when my time was up, where I could take a break, even if I didn't go to sleep, I could just take a break and relax, and I was supposed to wake up the next day. I didn't. Because I was so uncomfortable that something was watching me. So finally, as the night wore on and started to get into a little bit of a daylight as morning was coming, I start to shove the team leader to try to wake him up. And he was already awake. And he said, no, yeah, we can see, we can start getting up and start getting ready. So we all start getting ready. But as it turns out later on, as we were talking, nobody slept that night. Because everybody had the feeling we were being watched. And we were just on high alert. Now at that time, I didn't know anything about cryptids or anything like that. So I'm thinking, okay, Op 4 is just sitting out there in the woods and they got an ambush waiting for us. And we're going to lose this mission. And that's what I was thinking. But all 4 of us felt it. All 4 of us felt that it was unnatural. All 4 of us could not fall asleep. Each and every one of us was just sitting there wide awake, just waiting for something to happen. That's the only time that's ever happened to me. And we've spent, by the way, hundreds of hours probably out in the woods training. I never thought, I watched a coyote that almost walked up on top of us before because he didn't know we were there when we were hidden in our areas. To this day, that remains the weirdest night, and I always just put it off to, Op 4 was watching us, but it wasn't that. Now that I know about all this stuff, it was so quiet, and it wasn't until daylight started to finally come that we heard the forest come back to life, and we started hearing bugs and stuff like that again. What makes a whole forest go silent? And here we are, highly trained individuals, dedicated to our job. And none of us felt easy enough to even rest. It was just like we were on high alert the whole time we were sitting down. But the silence, I go back to it because I don't know how to explain that to people that have never experienced that. But being so quiet actually almost makes your ears ring because it is so quiet. And I've never experienced that again in my life ever. And I can't tell you what was out there. I don't know what was out there. All I can tell you is how my body felt is that we were being watched. And apparently everybody else in our team felt the same way. that none of us could rest. And that was my experience. And since then, now that I've gotten into it, I've heard a lot of things about Fort Polk and where I was at Fort Campbell, that a lot of things seem to happen there.
We don't know for sure what it was that caused that, but we can say definitively something wasn't right about that. It just doesn't get that dark where military optics refuse to work at night, and it just never gets that quiet where it's so quiet it hurts. Again, we don't know what it was, but we do know that, yeah, that's not normal. But having said that, we're about out of time, Joey. Before we get out of here, though, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share with us?
If I may be so bold as to say this, I just want to say, you know what? All these things are out there. We may or may not see them. They're definitely going to change your world when you have an interaction with them. And forgive me for saying this, but at the same time, once you have your faith in the right place, we're all appointed to die at some point. And once you know where you're going, then even if these things come at you, it is what it is. Doesn't mean you're not going to be scared, but when people actually believe in something, you're willing to die for it. And that makes it a little bit more comforting.
You're a good man, Joey. I sure hope you never change. Because, like I said, you're top notch. Well, having said that, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the details of those experiences with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you for the time you take to listen to all of us and for everything you're doing for everybody that runs into these things.
Oh, you're welcome. I wouldn't have it any other way. But having said that, thanks again so much for your time and have a great night.